The electoral map of the UK is getting a shake-up at the next general election, with constituency boundaries changing to reflect population changes. On first analysis, it looks as if Keir Starmer and Labour are facing a tougher route to number 10, with a record 12.7% swing in votes required to win a majority in the House of Commons. South East England is to gain 7 new seats, while Scotland will lose 2 and Wales will lose 8. Joining me live to dissect the changes is Tony Blair's former political secretary, John McTiernan. I'm jolly glad he's here because he really does need to explain this to all of us. And the head of polling at Delta Polls, Joe Twyman. Let's start with you, John. Imagine the map as it is. Now explain to us various things. First of all, who and why? Who thought it should be changed? I know we've been talking about this for years and years. And why did they think it should be changed?
So the Cameron-Osborne government decided there should be constituencies that are more the same size, so not a 10% difference in the population, but a 5% difference. And they thought that there should be a reflection, and that's been agreed bipartisan, that as Scotland got devolution, there should be maybe fewer seats, and as Wales got more powers in the Assembly, the Senate, there should be fewer seats. And really what it reflects is the growing population in England. It's bigger now than it was before, and where that population growth has been, it's been in the southeast and in London. So across the pattern, there's more seats in the southeast of England. It's the big story. There are a couple more seats in London, which benefits Labour because London's a very Labour place now, and it does fairly reflect the movement of population. And if you look at it, it says that, in a way, if the vote in 2019 had been on these boundaries, Labour would have been even badlier beaten. But we knew that. We know that, in the end, Labour has to win, and to win across the country. And Labour's come back in Scotland a bit, as we saw last year in the by-election in Rutherglen. Labour's come back a lot in Wales, as we've seen in some of the Welsh elections. And Labour's come back across the country in England, as we've seen in all the by-elections, really, apart from the one Uxbridge in last year. So a mountain to climb. Keir knew that when he became leader of the Labour Party. I always thought it was such a big mountain, it would take two elections to really come back. But all the time that Rishi Sunak has been the leader of the Tory party, the Tories haven't been able to get above 30% in the polls. And all the time Sunak has been leader, Keir has had the Labour Party over 40%. And in that sense, he's climbed the mountain. He's just got to stay on top of the mountain now.
So what you mean is it will make a Labour victory harder, but not make it impossible, is that what you're saying?
Because in effect, if people voted today the way the polls are, Labour would win, because the swing has been that big for Labour. And the swing in the by-elections shows people are voting anti-Tory as well, which multiplies things. So you're looking at, had these been the boundaries when Labour lost under Corbyn to Tories under Johnson, it would have been harder for Labour. But now...
Let's bring Joe Twyman in from polling at Delta Poll. Hello, Joe. Good to see you on the programme. Explain the difference that this is going to make, because this is a fait accompli. It's happened. The boundaries have been redrawn. That's it. There's no discussion anymore about whether it should or shouldn't happen. It's happened. What effect do you predict that this is going to have?
Well, if the boundaries that are going to come into place were used at the last election, it's estimated that the Conservatives would have gained 7 more seats and Labour would have lost 2. Now, in a very tight contest, it's likely that that could make a difference. But it could equally be argued that the change is made because of the population changes. And so it's right that those are reflected. And we wouldn't want to return to the days of centuries ago when there were what were called rotten boroughs, with only 1 or 2 constituents voting in each constituency. And so it is the case that this situation favours the Conservatives. But if the most recent polling was replicated in a general election, so if the polls, as they are at the moment with the general election result, Labour would get a majority of over 150. And so the fact that the Conservatives gained 7 on the new boundaries is neither here nor there to the overall story. But it doesn't change the fact that by historical standards, the swing that Labour needs is enormous. But we knew that already. They need to gain 124 seats. They need a swing of 12.7 to get a majority of just 2. Now, Tony Blair achieved a swing of 10.2% in 1997, to put that in context. But at the same time, Labour only need its estimated 4.2% swing in order to deprive the Conservatives of a majority. And really, you could argue that the Conservatives really have very few friends left in Parliament. And so if they don't achieve a majority, it's really Labour's position to form alliances with other parties and get in there. 8.3%, that would give them the largest party in a hung parliament, but still, by historical standards, that's very large. Really, everything now comes down to the next few months between now and whenever the election will be. We expect the polls to contract. Will they? We'll have to see how much they do.
Right, we've got John McTiernan here virtually jumping out of his seat, I think with tremendous agreement and endorsement of every word you utter, and also excitement. I think you virtually leapt for joy at one stage there.
Yeah, well, because what Joe's saying is the polls show the country has changed in its support for Labour and the Tories since 2019. There's been two big events. There's been Partygate, and then there was Trustgate. The trust quartering budget, and it feels that the emotional contract between the government, the governing party, and the voters has been broken. And yeah, Joe's right that if the Tories lose their majority, they have no friends. The SNP can't support them. The Lib Dems can't support them. If there's any Green MPs after the election, it becomes like that. Even the DUP don't really like the Tory party. So they're the kind of the Billy No Mates of politics. They need to have a majority of their own. So does this change things? I think in a funny kind of way, it helps Keir Starmer, because Keir's going around saying to all the MPs, all the shadow cabinet in the Labour Party, Labour MPs, no complacency. And the headlines this morning will have told Labour no complacency. The news reports will have said no complacency. And it's probably good for campaigners, for party members, for activists, for councillors, for MPs, for candidates to see this and go, it really is a mountain. Like, it feels we've made a long distance in this, but it's a marathon. We could have the rest of the year. We could have, the election might not be declared till October, and it might not be held till November. So we've got a long journey to go. It feels like nothing's moving at the moment. And, we had Isaac Levito, the Tory party strategist, who's a great strategist, telling backbench Tory MPs yesterday, disunited parties don't win elections. Be united. And today, in the House of Commons, what do we see?
5 families. That's what we see.
5 families back again.
Not 1, not 2, not 3, 5 families. John, thank you very much indeed.